Welcome to episode number 28 of Talking Mopars and our second installment of Direct Connections, the special editions of this podcast where we talk Mopars with other Mopar enthusiasts. So without further ado, if you are a Mopar enthusiast, then you are in the right place. Don't go anywhere. You're tuned into the best Mopar enthusiast-driven podcast on planet Earth. And I'm your host, Chris Albrecht, better known as the Mopar Hunter, and this is Talking Mopars, Direct Connections.
You're listening to Talking Mopars with the Mopar Hunter, your direct connection to all things Mopar.
Welcome back once again to Direct Connections. My guest today is no stranger to Talking Mopars. He's called in to share his stories of Mopar hunting on more than one occasion, and he's with us today to talk Mopars once again. Please welcome my friend, Jonny Mopar. My guest for today, Jonny Mopar. Jonny, how's it going, buddy?
Good, man. How are you doing, Chris?
Good, buddy. Good. Thanks for joining me on Talking Mopars. You are a frequent story contributor, and I appreciate that a lot. And I kind of wanted to get a little bit deeper into your history with Mopar. So, I'm always curious to hear people's Mopar stories, but one aspect of the stories that I really enjoy hearing is how people got started with Mopars. So why don't you take us back to the beginning and tell us how your Mopar journey started?
Well, man, I would have to say it was just sort of around me. I didn't really seek it out. It was sort of there. My mom's car, that I grew up in, is a 72 Charger, which I still have to this day. I'm working on trying to get it back together for her. Back in 82, my dad, back way up. My dad had a 69 or 68 Dodge Charger, 440, 4-speed Dana bitchin' car back when I was a kid. He blew up the motor. It sat when we moved to Southern California from Northern California. He sold the car off, and then we lived with my grandfather for about a year while they saved money to buy their own house. And then he went out searching for another Charger, so he found a 68 Dodge Charger, which is the blue one I have today. So in 82. So as a kid, I grew up on the Dukes of Hazzard. So that was a huge contributor to, I would say, Chargers at least. Back then it wasn't really like Mopar or, it was just, I loved Chargers. Chargers were my thing. And I got bit by that bug. And then I'd say in high school, I just happened to have a really close buddy. A friend that I made that was also into Mopars. His dad had Roadrunners. And so he kind of grew up as a Plymouth guy, and I kind of grew up as a Dodge guy. And then that kind of just solidified the whole Mopar thing. I think from that point on, it kind of spread into other Mopars, where it was just a Mopar thing. But
very cool.
Yeah.
So your family were Mopar people. Was
Yeah.
that intentional, or is that just kind of happenstance?
I think it was happenstance. I think my grandfather had an old Dodge pickup, swept line, I think it was a 62, 3 or 4, something like that. He had a 72 Dodge, and it was just, he wasn't necessarily like a hardcore Dodge guy or anything. It just had it, My dad was kind of into everything, and even today, he's kind of an everything guy. He's more of the old school hot rodder, like loves old Ford body styles with, Chevy V8s in them. But
Yeah.
When he got that Charger, the first one, it was he was working at a mechanic shop. He was a mechanic by trade, and a customer came out from Texas, and I guess he blew the transmission or blew the motor or something. Something went wrong with the car. The car was a couple of years old or so. It was financed, and the guy just abandoned the car. And my dad worked on fixing it at this shop, and he talked to the bank about buying the car. So he ended up buying the car from the bank while this other guy just abandoned it, basically. So, and I think that sort of solidified it for him as far as that's a badass car, and then why he went out to go buy another one to replace it, years later.
Very cool. So it sounds to me like you've actually kept some of these heirloom cars in the family. Was that like I'm never getting rid of these cars are staying around? Or is it just that maybe they're in
Abs-
various stages of project or what?
well, like my dad's car is definitely needing some love. I'm probably not going to restore it anytime soon. It's not bad enough to restore it. It's definitely rough, but I kind of want to leave it a ratty muscle car and get it together. My mom's car I had painted and, putting it together nice. It's not going to be like some, show car. It's just going to be a nice driver, basically. But yeah, I'll never sell those. A lot of my friends, my close friends, know I have this. I call it the ring system. So, and you might go through this eventually, or there's probably guys that have gone through this. You go through these stages where you have so much stuff, and you start to think to yourself, I have too much. I got to let go. I'll never finish these, or I don't have time for them, or whatever, right?
Yeah, sure.
And if you're like me and you got a lot of cars, I know there's a lot of Mopar guys that have tons of them, maybe 10 or maybe it's 100, right? So, and you decide, I got to get rid of some. What do? It's kind of overwhelming. So, my ring system is you have the cars at the core in the center that you will never get rid of. Like, you just put those cars into that area and you don't wrap your head around those because it'll just never happen. And then you start plotting the cars out to the outer rings till you get to the point where your least loved car is on the most outer ring and you just wrap your head around that one car. Can I let this car go? Do I want to get rid of it? Does it make sense? And then, let the car go, or you decide you don't want to let it go. And if you can't let that car go, every other car on the inside of that ring is not going to get gone either. So, yeah, those cars are at my core. I have my high school car, my dad's Charger, my mom's Charger. I'd even say my 68 Coronet. It's just been around too long to, it's been through too much with me that I'll probably never get rid of that one either. So,
Gosh. Okay. So we already can tell that you have a lot of Mopars, but before we get into how many you have, why
okay.
don't you tell us about your why don't you tell us about oh, and by the way, that ring system, I've never actually heard of it conceptualized like that, but I know that there are a lot of guys that think like that. So it's interesting how you put it into a thought form as far as, how you think about it. Cause I don't think a lot of people have actually thought of it like that. But now that I think about it, like my two Mopars are the first two classic Mopars that I've ever bought. Cause I've always wanted classic Mopars, never been in a position, never had the money. And then finally I had enough change scraped up that I could do it. And now that I have them, every time I think about getting rid of them, I always look into the future and I go, you know what? I'm going to regret getting rid of the first Mopars that I got my hands on.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to make that sacrifice. Not yet, anyway. It would have to be
Yeah.
for something that I want even more. But so far, that hasn't come up yet. But so I like the ring concept. I'm gonna
Yeah.
remember that. I wrote it down.
Good.
um,
Good. Yeah. Share it. I'm sure there's people that can use it and I came up with it because I had to. I kind of got to a point. We were living here. We've got about an acre, so I had the space, I had the room, and we were looking at buying a house. This was a couple of years back. Actually, I've been through this a couple of times. So a couple of years ago, we're looking at buying another house, smaller property. I would have had to downsize, and it's like, I mean, if you're a car guy like me, this. It's hard if you've got 10 cars and you're like, what do I do? Which one do I get rid of? It's really hard to wrap your head around it all. It's overwhelming. And most people I know that have to go through this, they just sort of shut down, mentally shut down. I can't let none of
yeah,
them go. Screw it. That's it. Well, doing it this way was sort of like I can not focus on the inner cars and just worry about the outer cars. Get rid of, wrap your head around the one car. And then once you can let go of that car, then you go to the next one. At some point, eventually, you're going to get close enough to the inner rings where you're like, there's just no way I can ever let go of this car. And everything inside of that is just not going to happen.
gosh, I'm
So,
afraid of those outer rings because I'm gonna be like, oh no, I can't get rid of
oh,
that.
it's tough. Hey, every car I've had a dream around. I've had an idea, I've had a concept in my head. So yeah, it's sort of like getting rid of your children when you have to get rid of them. But I did it the time before that, and this was around the same time that General Mayhem left my yard. But we were in a position where 2008 was. We were kind of on that downward swing. we ended up losing our house. We left there around 2012. So it was like a forced downsizing, so.
But you still had that core, that inner circle. You
Yeah,
managed to keep them.
I still drug
Good.
over like 10 or something.
Yeah. Now I know our listeners are probably going, did he just say General Mayhem? Relax. We're going to get to that, folks. You got to wait on that story. So before we get into all that, what was your first Mopar, Jonny?
It was actually a 70 Chrysler, and I believe it was a Newport. I'm not 100% sure if it was a Newport, a New Yorker, or a 300, but I'm pretty sure it was a Newport. It was a 4-door. I wasn't trying to buy this car. I wasn't seeking it out, and we're talking like, God, this was way back. This would have been like around 1986 or so. Just a kid. We moved from Los Angeles County out to Riverside County. Riverside's more rural. LA's more, obviously city. Coming out here, I befriended a kid up the street. We would ride dirt bikes around the neighborhood and stuff. And he knew this. We went to this place, these people he knew, long story short, this Chrysler sitting in the yard, and there's a station wagon sitting in the yard. And I already had the Mopar Bug, so it was like I didn't really know what the car was, other than it was like, oh, it's a cool Mopar. And I think my friend said something like, oh, he'd probably sell them to you. And I said, really? And so we started just bullshitting. I'm a freaking kid at this point, It's like I don't have no money. I don't have a driver's license. But we get to talking and asked, well, would you sell those cars? And he goes, yeah. So it was the 70 Chrysler, and it was a 72 Plymouth Fury station wagon. The front bumper kind of looks like a 70 Super B. I mean, but this thing is a huge boat. Anyways, he goes, yeah, I'd sell them. Like, how much? And he said, $25 each. I'm like, whoa, I can own my own car, So I haul ass. We haul ass back to the house, and I tell my dad. And he's like, whatever, like no big deal. It's like it's $25, Yeah, all right, we'll buy them. So we go over there and we drug them home. I probably should have tried to get the car. I didn't know anything. No mechanics, no education, I knew nothing. I've never turned a wrench other than building model cars and stuff like that, And I think my dad might have talked me into it because he was a mechanic. Like, oh, you should take the engine apart and rebuild it and blah, 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 which I should have never listened. I should have threw gas in it and a battery in it. It probably would have fired up and ran, But it was a 383. I pulled it out and just took it apart. It's just like, oh, wow, there's the valve cover. Hey, there's rockers, Just took it apart and kind of got to see how an engine was put together. So that was my very first car. And in fact, I never did anything with the car. I kept the motor. The idea was I was going to build this big block for a bitchin' car like a Roadrunner or something later on. So the car sat there. And when we first moved out there, this property was just raw land, And we were cutting down bushes and stuff like that. We'd throw them in the back part of the property. My dad he kind of had like his own dump, right?
Okay.
And this neighbor behind us, he ran a backhoe. He was a backhoe operator, and he had his own tractor and stuff like that. So one day he got him to get the Chrysler and push it into that trash area and basically crush the car and run it over. So that car is actually still there on my parents' property, buried in the back.
So you still have your very first Mopar, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, technically, yes. It's underground, and I'm sure there's not a panel good on it, but yeah, it's there.
Whatever happened to the 383?
I think over the years, man, I probably had those heads for 20, 30 years. I never did anything with the engine.
Okay.
I went on to other things, and I probably used some parts off of it for other big blocks, but I never rebuilt it.
Very cool. But you got your feet wet on a big block Mopar. That's cool.
I did.
Not a lot of people can say that.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I'm sure people have gathered by now that you have had a lot of Mopars in your lifetime. How many Mopars do you currently have?
I think it's 10 or 11. I think it's 10.
What are they?
So 272 Chargers, a 68 Cornet, 268 Chargers. And I should say the 72 Chargers, one of them is my mom's car. She made me part owner of the car. And the 68 I got from my dad, it's all mine. I could tell you that story too. But so the 268 Chargers, a 69 Cornet wagon.
I love that car, by the way. I love that wagon. I spied on your pictures, and I look at that car, and I'm like, God, wagons are just, I don't know. For some reason, lately, I've been really into 4-doors and wagons, especially. It's a good thing that you have one because they are hard to find.
Yes, and they rust out really easily too.
There's one locally. It's a 68, I think, Satellite, and it's rotted. It's rotted pretty bad. I still want it, but the guy wants like $6,000 for it. And I'm like, but it's got a 383 in it. And I'm like, oh God.
Oh man.
But it's rotted. I'm like, ugh. But yeah, those wagons are cool.
Even mine is rotted. Bottom of the doors have rust and the floors are rusted on it. But yeah, same like you, man. When I found this car, I just had to have it. I saw it on Craigslist, and it had a 69 500, grill in it. And I'm like, oh man, that looks kind of weird. But I'm pretty sure they didn't make well, maybe they did. I don't know. But the car was not a 500. It was actually a deluxe, which is ironically the lowest of the totem pole of the class models,
Sure.
It didn't sell. I want to say the car was listed for, it's like $1,500 or $1,800. And this is only a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe.
Oh,
and I actually printed up the Craigslist ad, and I just kept it. Just like, I loved the car, I wanted the car, but I didn't have the money for the car, and I just kept it.
Sure.
And then, man, I want to say over a year, maybe, or close to a year went by, and I'm like going through stuff. I came across the ad I had, right? And I'm like, I'm just going to call him just for the hell of it, because I had the money at that time. So I call the guy up and I go, hey, I know this is a really old ad. I kept the ad from a long time ago. I was just curious if you still had the car or not. And he goes, yeah, I still have it. It never sold. A lot of people called on it. Nobody actually bought it. And I was actually thinking about reposting it, and I just didn't do it yet. And I'm like, sweet. So drove out there and picked it up. So, yeah, awesome. So you never know.
Yeah, that one, the one that I see all the time, and I secretly I look at it quite a bit. I'm just like, God, that would be cool to have. It's on Craigers that are a little rusty, and I'm just like, ooh, a ratty wagon. I kind of like the idea.
Yeah.
But I have more Mopars than I have room for, and that's only 2. So that's my situation.
Yeah. You need to look into buying a bigger piece of property, man. Then you could be a normal Mopar guy.
Trust me, I talking to the wife, I'm like, all right, next place needs enough place to park, 10 or 15 cars, and then I need a decent sized shop. And she's like, you're not having 15 cars. And I'm like, don't worry about that. I just need the ability. I need the ability.
Right.
As we all know, as Mopar guys, sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So.
Exactly. Yeah, you ask for a lot so you could come back a little, right? You end up with like room for 8.
Yeah, exactly. When I found my Dart, my wife was on a business trip. And it's funny because her best friend said something to her about, he'll probably buy a car or something stupid while you're gone. And I'll be damned if I didn't call her while she was on business. Hey, I found a car. And she's like, what do you mean? I had to tell her. She's like, just do whatever. And I'm like, okay, you asked for it. But so okay, we didn't get through your whole list, did we? I don't think we're through the list. We got to the wagon.
No, yeah, we stopped at the wagon. Sorry.
Keep going.
79 Power Wagon.
Nice.
Not that this counts, but I got a 75 D100 long bed parts truck. It's just parts truck. The 69 Charger that I picked up recently through my friend.
The black one.
The black one I call Road Rash, right?
Yeah.
And then at my buddy's house, I bought from my buddy a 70 Dodge Charger RT that was going to be built into a pro street. So the back half's been started. It's been cut away, and this happened years ago. So before anybody gets all pissed off that you're cutting up a real RT car, it's like it happened a long time ago when they were worthless. So get over it, and it's going to stay a pro
Hey,
street.
on that note, I don't. That stuff doesn't bother me. I don't get bothered when I see a quote unquote rare or special Mopar that is getting quote unquote chopped up for
Yeah,
something cool like that. It's better than it rotting in the field or something like
sure.
that. So anybody that complains about that is just ridiculous. Like I just ran across this article. This guy, I guess he's a journalist, an automotive journalist, and he found for the life of me, I can't remember the drag racer's name, but he found this 446 pack Plum Crazy Cuda that has 149 original miles. I think it's 149 original miles on it. He drove it home basically from the dealer, put a Hemi in it. So he bought a 67 GTX with a Hemi convertible, pulled the Hemi out of it, put it in his Cuda, and the GTX just sat there. So the guy passes away, and here is this Survivor shaker hood Hemi car now that used to be a six pack. It's insane. So the guy dies, and his collection gets sold off. And when it happened, on one hand, it's like, okay, the guy who bought it, is he going to restore it and put it back to original and try to make some money on it? Because who knows how much he bought it for? It's kind of undisclosed. But he is keeping the car 100% the way it originally that they found it. So it's still got all the old drag racing stickers on it, the logo, I think it was Drag Addicts or something like that.
Nice.
Really cool. But yeah, he fired it up. It's just 149 miles. The thing looks brand new. It's like a time capsule. He shined it up, did a little spit shine on that paint, and it just came alive. It's like, oh my God. So like when I see things like that, I'm like, how many more of those cars are out there that nobody knows about? Because the guy, I guess he was saying that, he's one of those recluse Mopar guys where he doesn't want anybody to come out and stuff. And, when he was asked about why he kept it for so long and why it's kind of a secret, he's like, bragging rights. The longer I hold on to it, the more bragging rights I have. Hey, he's right. Unfortunately, he didn't make it to enjoy all the bragging rights, but at least the car is being taken care of,
Yeah, that's good. And that's the way I would have gone with that car. There's a fine line. There's definitely a fine line. I think once a car kind of develops its own history, I mean, I won't mention it. I won't mention the car we were going to talk about. But let's take the car we're going to talk about. What if somebody bought that and restored it all original someday? It'd be like erasing everything that car was all about, and I think that's what you do. And a car with that kind of rich history, it's like it just deserves to stay the way it is.
Absolutely.
I think Mopar Collector's Guide had an article. They talked about this once, and some guy was like one of those winged. He had a Superbird, and he put a funky paint job on the car, right? And the guy passed on. The car got sold, and the guy that bought it, it was like a 446 pack car. The guy restored it all original. Vitamin C orange and all that. And the guys in Mopar Collector Guide were kind of making the arguments like, so what? How many orange Superbirds with 446 packs are out there? There's tons of them. You just erased a unique car where this guy, like, I'm trying to think of that club. It was some sort of club. I don't know if it was here in California, but it was like all these winged warrior guys. So these Daytonas and Superbirds will all like meet up and hang out. But this guy was like there all the time. And everybody knew the car because it was so unique, So it's like, I don't know. I don't on that one, it's like, I'm not sure what the right answer is. I think if I owned it, the color scheme wasn't all that appealing to me. So I probably would have gone the other way, but on the other hand, it's like, I think the right answer is, and they made this point, it's like, if you got to have one, there's plenty out there. Go buy one that's, can be restored back to original. Like leave this one alone, leave it for somebody else who's going to enjoy it with the funky paint job on it and the history that it has, so.
Sure. Going back to your Charger, do you have vendor tags on this thing? It's got the VIN and all that stuff, or what?
Which one?
The 70 RT, the one that's getting pro streeted.
It does. In fact, my buddy. Yeah, people are gonna be pissed when they hear this because my buddy he hates these guys. He hates these numbers guys and the rarity. I mean, I'm not like that. I like that stuff, but I
Sure.
also like a hot rod that you just go out there and just thrash on
Absolutely.
it. But he was gonna put a full cage in the car, and he wanted to take the fender tag and just like on the bar that goes down the fender well, like just put 4 tack welds on the corner of the fender tag, and he's like, "I'll make sure I put enough weld to erase part of the part of one
Oh.
of the codes," and,
Oh.
and I'm like, "No, don't do that." So that won't happen. So don't freak out. But it just goes to show the clash between those two groups, and it's different too. If those old school guys going back far enough, like nobody gave a shit about that stuff. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. But again, like I kind of go back and forth because on one hand, gosh, it's really cool that you have all that documentation and that it
yeah,
could be a really nice restored example and you have some documentation.
yeah,
It's not a car that, oh, you bought it with no tags and, hey, just have
yeah.
fun with it. It's an RT, but we don't know much about it. We don't have the build sheet, nothing. But on the other hand, it's like at the end of the day, you still have an RT charger and you
Right.
have as much documentation as you need. As long as you got that tag, you know what it had.
Yeah.
So if you ever wanted to, I mean, they make all the parts for them. So if you wanted to, I mean, it's not like
You you could.
ruined the car completely.
Right, right. And whenever it happens, it's just that car is so low on the totem pole as far as my priorities right now. But when I get to it, it's like that fender tag will stay on the car and it'll be put on correctly, even though the
Yeah.
thing's got some fat tires in the back and it's tubbed.
Yeah.
Uh, and who knows, after I'm long gone, maybe somebody will restore the car all back to normal. But for me, the cost is too high. Like it would be way too expensive for me to try to put factory frame rails and floorboards and all that stuff after it's already been cut out of it. I think it's cheaper just to go forward with the back half. And I'm one of the '90s guys. The '90s were my time. So
Yeah.
Pro Street cars were it that time.
Oh
That's
yeah.
all I ever wanted was a Pro Street Charger. So now I have one. So
Very cool. All right. So that's not the end of your list, is it? You still got more?
uh no, that was the end of the list. I
Okay.
was I wasn't counting, but yeah, we can count if you want. The 3 in the
That-
shop, the
okay.
268, 69, 70, uh the Power Wagon, the station wagon. Oh, I forgot my Duster. My
Okay. I was
74
gonna ask
Duster with the
I was
440,
gonna
yeah.
ask about okay. And that's the green one, right?
That's the green one. Yeah.
Okay, I see pictures of that car too, and I'm like, God, I never hear him talk about that one. I don't know the story on
Yeah.
that, so give us a quick rundown on that one. I like the license plate on it. I think it's
Oh,
really
thank
cool.
you.
It's one of my favorite parts about the car. As stupid as that sounds, I'm just like, oh, cool license plate. So tell
Thank
us
you.
about your 74.
Uh, there's not much of a story there. I went up to there was this guy up in God, I'm trying to think. I think it's like the Lancaster area. It's like the high desert, and he was doing rechroming, like bumper rechroming. And so
Okay.
I shot out there. I took him my Roadrunner bumpers and my Coronet bumpers to get them rechromed, and my '72 Charger bumpers to get rechromed. And while I get up there, there's this '74 Duster, and it's just like completely stripped. It's just a shell. And start BSing with them, and this is after I was racing my old D100, which was a heavy tank, and it was like, wow, this thing looks like it's pretty light. This would move up the list as far as being a much faster car
Sure.
than building anything else. So, anyways, he said him and his buddy built this car. They drag raced it. They ended up selling it to a couple, and this lady was actually racing the car. I can't remember her name, but if you go to the Caltrax website, the car is in there. It had Caltrax on it. It was running a 440 at the time. It was white with black on the bottom and had decals all over it. But I guess they didn't he was friends with these people, but they didn't really like the Duster body. They liked the Dart body more of the square
Okay.
look. and it was like, I think they were looking for a 71 or 2, 70, 71 or 2, like that kind of a dart. And so one day he goes, he got a Valiant. I think it was a 71 or 2 Valiant. And he goes, "Hey, I got this Valiant. It's the same thing as a dart. You know, do you want to come and look at it?" Sure. So they go over there and they look at it. They like the car. I I don't think they liked the Plymouth front end on it, so they might have put a Dodge front end on it at some point or something. But long story short, they bought this car from him, and he's like, "Well, take all the parts off of the Duster, put it on your car, and then give me the Duster back." Okay, cool. So he gets the Duster back, and he's pissed now because he's like, they took everything out of the car. They even cut the roll cage out of the car. They took the aluminum door panels and stuff like that out of the car and used it as templates in building the Valiant. And so he was just burnt out. He's like, my buddy and I did all this work to this car, and we get this thing back, and it's just unusable. You know, he's just like, I'm not going to build it again. So he was done with it. So I asked how much he wanted for it, and he said $1,100. So I was like, all right, cool. So I drug it home. I mean, one of the selling points was that he was like, "Oh man, we sat under that car scraping the undercoating off of the thing with a torch," and he's like, "What a pain in the ass," you know. And I'm like, "That's not something I ever want to try." So
Oh my gosh.
it's nice to get it already done. But yeah, I honestly, that car was a huge mistake. Uh,
Really?
yes, yes, it took way too many years to put together. Back when I got the car, it was shortly after I was racing the truck. Shortly after I was racing the Roadrunner, I raced the Cornet a couple of times, and then it was like, well, Duster's even lighter. Like, what a perfect race car to race. It's been like 12, 13 years now. You know, I've been working on that car on it, off and on, off and on, and putting a big block in an A body. Man,
Don't scare me away, dude, because I got one.
I'm sorry, man. It's a pain in the ass. It is a pain in the ass.
So I
So,
hear.
yeah, I swore I will never. I mean, unless it's like a GTS or a Formula, you know, CUDA
Yeah.
or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
I will never touch a big block in an A body again. I'm done.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
So you do have one A body,
I do have one. It's my last
but you're
one.
you're a B body guy though.
I am
Yeah.
definitely a B body guy. I
Now
can't tell you.
Roadrunner, I'm sorry. Do you don't still have the Roadrunner, do you?
I do not.
Okay.
No, no.
Okay.
I've had three in my life, Roadrunners. The last one was a really nice restored car. I paid a lot of money for. You know, I
Okay.
paid like, I say a lot of money, but it was 21.5. I paid for that car,
Sure.
but it was a beautiful car, black 4-speed car. It was a 383 originally, but it had a 440 in it with fuel injection and stuff. Beautiful car. But I got tired of making the payment on it, so I sold it to pay off the loan that I got against it. Uh,
Okay.
the one I had the most fun with was my blue one, which was a ratty muscle car. That thing was
I
just,
love that thing too.
yeah. It honestly, dude, that's my favorite car. When I think about it, it it doesn't mean I love it the most. Like, I'm a Charger guy, hardcore. Like, that's my car. However, the amount of time I spent in the car, the amount of fun I've had with a car. I mean, having the Coronet, which is a pretty nice car. I'm not going to say it's show car quality, but it's a nice car. You know, when I got it done and you drive it places, it's like, yeah, I got to park it way the hell out in the parking lot so nobody parks next to me, you know. And even then I don't like leaving the car alone. It's like I don't go somewhere if I'm going to walk away from the car, you know. The Roadrunner on the other hand though, shitty paint job. It was rough. It had scratches. It had dents. You know, it was like I could park it all the way close to the grocery store and walk inside, not worry about it. You know, uh, thrashed on it at the drag strip, and just everything about that car. It just worked. It worked, and it was reliable. It would start every time. You know, I mean, it gave me some hiccups here and there in the beginning, but after I got it dialed in, it was just like the most reliable car I've ever had.
So that probably leads into one of my other questions, which was going to be, do you have a Mopar from your past that got away that you wish you could have back? Is it the Roadrunner?
Oh man, definitely the Roadrunner is on that list. Uh,
Folks, you can
yeah.
get an idea of how many Mopars Jonny has had because he's got a list of the ones that got away. Okay. Keep that in mind, folks.
Well, I was trying to think, it's like cars that I've owned that got away. There was that one. There's cars that I've owned that were kind of taken away by
Mm.
fire, I
Oh,
wished I
God.
had. There's cars that I found that I wanted to buy, but didn't have enough money, and then they got away.
Okay.
you
Okay.
know,
Fair
so
enough. Fair enough.
yeah, we'll go with the
It's,
Roadrunner though.
it's crazy when you're talking about the Ring, and I'm thinking
Yeah,
about all the cool cars that that you don't have, and I'm like, God, So what is the car at the center? So your parents' cars are the two cars at the very very center.
I'd say three at the very center. It's my high school
Okay.
car.
Okay.
This is the one I called in on your show and
Okay.
told you about from high
Yeah.
school from the
Yeah.
bus.
That you still have.
I still have it. I still have it. It's waiting to be restored. It's all
Okay.
apart, but I still have it. So that one's at the core. My mom's car's at the core, and my dad's '68 Charger's at the core. I would say everything else is at least a ring out from that. Meaning if I had to pick, those three would never leave. One of the other ones would have to leave first.
Okay. Let me just take a guess here. If someone said, "Hey, Jonny, you got to get rid of one today," I'm guessing it's going to be the big block duster. Am I wrong?
Ooh.
You
Well,
can't
you're
the
right.
parts or the parts part doesn't count.
Okay, the parts car doesn't count. The Power Wagon, I haven't had a lot of time in. I bought it. I
Okay.
did a lot of stuff, but so the Power Wagon would be easy to let go.
Okay.
Uh, my blue '72 Charger, which was the other story I called in on your show
Yeah.
about. Uh, there's some blood, sweat, and tears into that car, but that one would go first. You know, uh, even even that '69 that I have, it's like I don't have any plans to get rid of that car, but it's like I don't have any. Uh, we haven't connected yet. It's just
Sure.
I have it and it's there, but it's like that connection has yet to occur. So when you get that seat time and you rack your knuckles a few times in the engine bay and you're dropping the big block in there, and then you start getting that connection and you start to say this car will
Yeah.
never leave.
Once you stain it with your blood and sweat.
Exactly.
I, I can't help but think about some of the listeners that are sitting there going, "Hold on a second, how many cars does he have?" They may be keeping track, and they're going, "Wait a second, how many Chargers does this guy have?" So Jonny, I want you to get these people thinking, what is the cheapest charger that you have? What's the lowest amount of money you spent on a charger? And I think if people have been listening to the show, I think they know, but we'll
Yeah.
refresh some of the people's minds.
That would be the free one. That would be the blue '72 I got for free. That I didn't even want. I didn't I didn't go there to buy that car. I went there to buy a '68 Charger. Well, I didn't know. Uh, uh, just to recap the story, as fast as possible. The thing is, I have these buddies. We played poker all the time for years. And then out of the blue, it's like I've got Chargers all alongside my house. And out of the blue, one of my buddies is like, I think my father-in-law has one of those in his yard. And I'm like, a Charger? Yeah. Well, what year? I don't know. It looks like the General Lee. I'm like, okay, well, I have to go look. You cannot leave that stone unturned. So we go look, and sure enough, it's a '68. $300, paid $300 for that car. And the guy's like, "You want another one?" And I'm like, "Yeah," but he points to the '72, and I'm like, "You got another one?" "Oh, it's a '72." And I'm like, no, I'm good. And then I go, well, I'm like thinking, then it clicked, right? It's like, well, I just paid $300 for a '68. How much could he possibly want for the '72? $100? Well, how much for the '72? Oh, you could just have it. Just get it out of my yard. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay, I'll
There you
take
have
that.
it, folks. There you have it. Now,
Free.
okay, let's let's continue the streak of entertainment. What
Okay.
is the most money you've ever spent on a second generation charger? You don't have to answer that, but if you would, I'm sure people would be a little curious.
Yeah. Uh, well, it's probably the 69 I just bought. Most of the chargers I've had them for years, and I've paid
Sure.
so little money for them. So the charger that I just bought, the 69, well, it's a toss up because the 69 and the 70, I think I paid the same. So
Okay.
it's like $3,500. So
People were sitting there going, "Oh, he's probably spent 30 grand on one." He had to have.
no,
I mean, look at how
no.
much chargers are these days.
Yeah, the Roadrunner is the most expensive car I've ever bought. I take that back because I think I paid $2,400 for the 69. I paid 3,500 for the 70. So the 70 RT is the most expensive car I've ever bought.
All right. The next time you run across a charger, a second generation charger that's less than 20 grand, Johnny, you have enough. Just give your buddy Chris a call. Let me have that one, okay?
Okay, just
Man,
so you know, you're standing in line. I get that a lot.
oh god, oh god, I can't. Hey, you got to have your place in line somewhere.
Right.
Gosh, I'll take that gamble. But like, I know there's people listening right now. They're like, okay, the next time I see a $25,000 Rock box, I'm going to tell them, oh no, I heard this podcast and there's this guy Johnny on there, and he gets them for $300 all day long. So
He's,
you just swayed the market, Johnny.
he's probably going to be the guy trying to buy something from Mike Coffee, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. Hey, Mike, if you're listening to this, how can you justify your prices when Johnny's over here getting cars for free? All right.
Right?
Oh, that's funny.
Uh,
But that just goes to show that, if you're in the right place at the right time, and you've had your cars for a long time, a lot of them anyway. But even
yeah.
in today's market, I mean, you tell anybody that you got a charger for less than 5 grand that isn't rotting into the ground, and it's unbelievable. Like I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if you're like, I paid 10 grand for that. I'd be like, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
Considering
It's
the ones I've been seeing.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably worth that much. I think my buddy's just being a buddy. You could argue he gave me the car,
Yeah,
I'm sure
sure.
he wouldn't have sold it to anybody at that price, but I'm not going to
So
say no.
I don't blame you at all. That's one that I wouldn't even talk to my wife about. I'd just come home with it and be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, do you want a divorce or what?
Yeah.
I'll take
Deal
my
with
charger and go. See ya."
Yeah.
um, uh, so out of all the cars you've had and the ones you currently have, which Mopar is your favorite? I don't think I asked you that one yet.
Hmm. I like a specific car.
Yeah, pick one.
Okay.
And I'll make it easy for you. Mom and dad's car, out of the question. Don't even we won't count those. Just
Okay.
yours specifically. That'll make it a
Okay.
little easier because that
It
would be
would be
kind of
my
hard.
it would be my high school car then.
Okay,
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
what I
The
thought.
68 Charger. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. We've gotten through a lot of your history. Let's get into the car that we mentioned earlier. You are the original owner for I don't know anybody that's a car enthusiast, especially a Mopar enthusiast, that does not know about the TV show Roadkill on Motor Trend with Freiberger and Finnegan. They had a project car called General Mayhem. Now, a lot of people they assume that Freiberger just had this car. They don't know the origins of this car, but as it were, you were the maybe not the first owner off the lot, but you were the
Sure.
previous owner before that car became General Mayhem. So, how did you? I don't think anybody's heard the story before Freiberger and before you. So, where did you get the car? Tell us
So
about that.
my buddy that I just bought the 69 Charger from, I got the car from him. You probably know this. You have Mopar guys that it's a niche, right? And then you have
Absolutely.
Charger guys. There's Charger guys. They're a niche. So there's a
Yep.
few guys I've come across over the years that's like they'll own other Mopars, but they're hardcore Charger guys. So my buddy John, he is a Charger guy. And he is just one of those guys that knows everybody. He's connected with everybody. And at that point in time, we'll call it, because I traded the car in 2009 I probably got the car from my buddy 2 or 3 years prior to that. And so we'd say, I don't know how many years prior to that he got the car, but, I would say that you're probably looking at 2000, early 2000s or something like that, maybe even earlier. And the buddies that he has, everybody knows he's a Charger guy. So a lot of the cars, he had tons of them. He had a lot of them. And if they had like two, back in that time, guys, at least here in California, like if a car had rust, it was a parts car, you know. Unfortunately, I mean, it's sad to say, but it's true. They were shunned, and so a lot of those cars got parts taken off them, and then like whatever was left over, they would either give it to my buddy John, or they'd sell it to John for a really low price, or they knew he liked them so badly that he would, because he was a body guy, body and paint guy, he would do work for them on their cars and then get the Charger as payment, and just how I met John, I had a 69 Dodge Dart. I had it for maybe over a year or two. I paid $300 for the car. I got it through
You're
a
hurting
friend.
my feelings right now.
Sorry.
Continue.
It's only a 318 car, man. So
Okay.
it was through a friend of a friend, and then I decided, the car sat in my backyard for a while, and being the B body guy that I am, it was, I didn't have the ring thing developed back then, but if I did, it was on the outermost ring, and I just decided I'm not going to ever do anything with this car. Let her go. And I put it up for sale for $500. And John called. And so, I gave him my address. He came over to look at the car. This guy pulls up in a 70 Coronet station wagon with a 440 in it. And I like my cars low. This thing was like slammed to the ground on steel rims, right? And he had these funky center caps, not dog dish, but it kind of had that look, He rolls up in this thing and it's two-tone. It's petty blue and black. And I'm like, damn, that thing's badass,
Yeah.
So bullshit with him, learned that he does paint and body for a living. He wanted the Dart, so I sold him the Dart. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't know what kind of work he did. So I went out to his place and he took me to another buddy of his that had some cars that he had painted. And he showed me those cars. And it's like, damn, he does good work. Okay. And then I still didn't quite trust him. So I wasn't going to give him a Charger. I wish I had, but I wasn't going to give him a Charger. So I gave him my Coronet to paint, which at that time it was just a beater car that I was driving all the time. It had a 318 in it at first, and I put a 383 in it. And he did bitching work on the thing. And yeah, I mean, if I had given him a Charger, that's what would be sitting in my shop, painted and done and nice, so regret. But that's how I met John. And in the process of, I think I heard you talk about a body and paint guy and a guy living in his shop while he did this. Okay. These guys, they must all be the same or something, because that's all John is. John is a recluse, sort of. Total cool guy, personable. You could talk to him, but he's quirky. He's a quirky guy. Yeah, he'd live in a van, next to his shop and go out and work on his car and stuff. That's how he was. Had no problem with it. So he would do work on the car, and I would have to go out there and I would give him, some cash for the work that he did. And I'd just go out every few weeks or something like that. And then one of the times I went out to visit him, I don't know how he had so much shit in his yard. Like, he had tons of cars, and he had this buddy that had a lot of rare cars. Like, you talk about my time being the 90s. This guy from the 80s was snatching up like fiberglass lift-off, 446 pack Super Bs and, Roadrunners. And yeah, I mean, super, super rare stuff. And John was storing a lot of it for him. So it was just like, they all needed to be restored, but awesome eye candy. Walking through, I ended up selling this Charger to Mike Coffey recently. But he had two 68 Chargers sitting there, complete. drivetrain missing on the one that I bought, but I told John, I'm like, man, would you sell this car? And he says, oh yeah, I don't know. Well, how much would you give me for it? And I said, I'll give you $5,000 for this car. And he's like, sold. So I drug that car home, and he'd built like these pods over cars and like hide them in his backyard. It was trippy.
Hmm.
It was like using building materials, but metal building materials, right? He would cut them all and rivet them together, screw them together. And I remember seeing him in his backyard, and I never thought to ask, like, what are those things, and what's their purpose? He had cars hidden in them, and it didn't click, because it's so weird, because when you look at a car, you kind of have this idea of how tall the car is and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He built these things so tight that the car would just barely fit in there. And it honestly, when you're not looking at the car, it just looked like it wasn't tall enough to house a car, because it was
Really?
just above the roof line. Yeah. So, yeah, he would hide all this stuff, because we have code enforcement crap out here in California. They're always busting on us. So he would stash his stuff. So anyway, yeah, I got
So
a
they
Charger
don't
here.
call him on these weird things that he's got built in the yard?
I guess not.
What is it with some Mopar guys are just they're a little out there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I love them, but they're a little out there.
Yeah.
That is hilarious.
Oh, John comes up with some wacky stuff all the time, but the guy's a genius. I mean, he comes up with stuff. I mean, if you've seen some of the work he does bodywork wise, he makes metal look like paper mache. You're like, oh,
Wow.
like the rear valance on the 72 Charger. It's like, oh, you want to cut it out for, exhaust tips? And I'm like, why don't I just buy it? And he's like, oh no, it'd be easier to cut, Bunky. We'll just, he just snips and hammers on stuff. He'll use stuff laying around on the ground as like, to beat metal around to shape it and stuff like that. It's crazy.
So he's an old school guy then.
He's an old school guy. He's not much older than me, but he's probably like 6 or 7 years older than me. And he's been doing it since day one. So he's just like really good at it. Yeah. But anyway, the Charger General Mayhem was in one of these pods. And of course, that car was way more stripped than the Charger I just bought for $5,000, So honestly, I don't remember what I paid for that car, because I got two hoopty cars from him, or rough Chargers. That one and another one that had a really rusty roof. It was a red car. The fender from that car is what ended up on General Mayhem. But anyway, I got those cars from him, and I had bought this 69 Charger from a guy I used to work with. He had a 69 Charger RT, and he bought this other car as a parts car, and he needed a roof. We worked out a deal where I bought the car from him, and he was going to cut this car up for the roof, because his was a vinyl top and it was rusty, right? I had a roof that I had cut out of a car from a boneyard years ago. So I said, well, I'm like, dude, don't destroy the car. Like, I'll give you my roof, which is cherry, no rust on it, and I'll give you some money for the Charger. Okay, cool. Yeah, that works out, because all he wanted was the roof anyway. His grandfather had pulled the car around with his tractor or something like that. Like, something happened, and I don't know, the tractor crashed into the car, or the car crashed into something else. It just got munched pretty hard. But long story short, my buddy John liked 69s more than, any other year. And so I traded him that 69 for one of the rough Chargers. I think it was for General Mayhem. But I think I got the rusty roof car for like just a few $100 more, So yeah, so that's where the car came from him. And I had it.
Does John know that car, what that car became?
I think he does. But he's not hung up on stuff like that. He doesn't care that much. I mean, I've mentioned it to him, and when I visit John, we don't talk about it. There's so much to talk about, there's so much stuff. And that's just one conversation that doesn't come up that much. But yeah, I've mentioned it to him. Yeah, I think he's said something like, oh, really? That's cool. Like, BFD.
So you end up with this car. You have no idea what the future holds for this car.
Right.
But what you told me is that you were selling it. So tell us about the process of selling it. So you're selling this car. Tell us about that.
So I just got that car. I got the rusty roofed car from John, and I got the $5,000 car from John. Plus, I already had my dad's blue Charger. I had my high school Charger. I had another 69 Charger. Like, I actually two other 69 Chargers. So I had a glut of cars, right? And I had especially a glut of Chargers. For whatever reason, I picked this car, plucked this car out. Like, I'm going to work on this car. I'm going to slap this thing together and I'm going to run it, and I pull it out. It's got a big dent in the quarter panel. And I started buying, those studs. You weld the stud to the car and then you use a
Yeah.
dent puller to them, right?
Yeah.
I put hundreds of these things in this quarter panel, just popping each one out and then breaking it off and then welding another one. Oh, I spent all this time on this car, right? And I put a porter power from the inside of the car, putting pressure on the quarter panel.
Oh,
It
yeah.
actually came up pretty nice. And if you look at the car, the quarter panel doesn't look caved in really. But if you look, I believe it was the passenger side, the top edge of the quarter panel, like, where the top of the door goes up
Yeah.
into the quarter panel. If you were to
Mhm.
rub your finger along that edge, you would reach a point where there's a kink in it. That kink went all the way to the bottom of the car. That whole quarter panel was like pushed in, I'd say like 6 inches or so at least. So I'm doing all this work and it's like day after day after day after day. And then I said, what the hell am I doing? This car is missing tons of parts. It has nothing. It has no interior in it. It has no drivetrain to it. It needs a front end suspension. I have no idea what's going on with the rear end. Like, it is stripped to the bones. It had no fenders on it. It had no hood on it. It had no grill. I think it had a back bumper, but it didn't have a front bumper. I mean, it was missing everything. And somebody had cut the trans tunnel, like they were going to put a 4-speed in it or something at one point, right? And so I'm like, this is stupid. So I said, screw this car. I'm getting rid of it, and I'm going to spend my time on another car that, I've got Chargers up to my eyeballs that are in 10 times better shape than this car. Like, why am I wasting my time on this thing? So I decided to sell it.
Folks,
And-
I want you to understand right here before Johnny continues that he had so many Chargers that he decided to get rid of one because it was too much work. Okay. I want you to think about that for a minute so that you can cry into your pillow at night like I do. Okay. Sorry, Johnny, continue.
No
When I
problem.
listen to you talk, I know you and I know you're a good guy. So when I hear you say these things, I can only imagine if I was listening to this show and I wasn't sitting here talking to you, I'd be like, this guy's out of his mind. He's getting rid of what is he thinking? Hey, when you've got one too many,
Right.
sometimes you got to start cutting those cords.
You
God,
do.
that you have problems that 99.9% of Mopar people that don't have those cool cars wish they had. I know I'm sitting here, I'm like, God, I would die to have that problem with darts. If I had too many darts, like, I got to get rid of one today. See ya. But
I'm
sorry,
telling
buddy,
you,
continue.
no problem. It was a different time, man. It was
Sure,
definitely a different time. In fact, perfect segue. I decided to sell the car, and I had lots of Charger parts too. I never had a glut of fenders. Fenders were always hard to find for Chargers all the way back, and someday I'll tell you the story of my 68 Charger, my high school car. I told you already that the previous owner had a little bit of a drinking problem and he wiped out the front end of that car. I had to put a 70 front clip on that car just to drive it, and
Oh, wow.
could not find parts for it. But anyways, so I put the chart. I gathered up parts that I had to make the car look more presentable because, with the whole front clip off of the car, it had no deck lid on it, no interior in it. It was like there wasn't much there other than the shell. So I think I had already sold the red car. This guy, he would come from the Midwest somewhere, and he would come out to the West Coast every now and then. And I think he somehow found my buddy, and then my buddy gave him my number. and he would buy parts. He'd just buy Mopar parts and then take them back to the Rust Belt and sell them because it was clean California parts, So he calls me up and he's like, "You got anything for sale?" And I'm like, rusty roof charger. I'd already gotten rid of my spare roof that I had, so it was like, yeah, I'll get rid of this car. I think I sold it for $600. I know, but I kept some parts. Mainly the fender. I kept the fender off of the car. I had a blue hood sitting on it. I think that came from my own parts cache. Sold that car, and then when I was putting General Mayhem together to sell, I had started to black primer the car. I threw a deck lid on it. I started black primering the car, and then I think I was like, it needs a fender in a hood, preferably two fenders, but I only had one from the red car, so I threw the red fender on it. And then I'm looking at my other parts, and it's like, the hood from my dad's Charger was already cut out. So out of all of my nice hoods, it was like that was the worst hood. And I'm like, when I got it when I was younger and I wanted the hood and I got it from my dad, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a drag car and I'm going to have, a scoop on top of that hole. So it's like, I really wanted it. But by that time I was kind of over all of that.
Sure.
So I threw that hood on the car. So the hood and the fender were sort of an afterthought, which is why they never got black primered black like the rest of the car. Yeah. And then put it up for sale. And yeah, I know it sounds amazing, but it's like, it's not just me. I got everybody calling me on the car. I think I listed it for $3,000 to start. And, lackluster response. So it dropped to like 2,800. I think I dropped it again to 2,600. I get people calling me and just telling me their dreams and aspirations. One of the stories I can remember was this guy calls me up and he's like, I always wanted to build an old funny car, like the first, 68 Charger funny cars, which, if you remember the Mr. Norm's funny car.
Supercharger.
Yeah. They're actually really narrow cars. Like I don't know how many inches are cut out of it, but he wanted to build that. He wanted to cut a section down the center of the car and narrow the car. Of course, I'm like, I would not do that, but I didn't care. I'm not going to tell. It's like, you do what you want as long as you buy the car. But I had to listen to his long story, like everybody's listening to my long story now. But and it's like, I'm like, so you going to buy it or what?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to try to come up with the money, man. I'm going to call you back.
Oh,
Okay.
God.
Never called back. Yeah, I got a lot of those calls, lots. And Freiberger, I think he shot me an email and he said, "Hey, I'm David Freiberger, editor for Hot Rod Magazine, and of course I'm like, I don't care. I don't know who the hell you are. He wasn't as famous as he is today. But he goes, "Hey, I got I think he emailed me first and then I called him, or he called me. Anyway, he said, I've got some brand new Mopar aluminum heads in the box. They've never been mounted on an engine. Would you be willing to trade?" Because he's like, I think those heads at that time were around $2,200 or so.
Mhm.
And I'm asking, like, maybe I was asking $2,400 for the car. So it's like, and I already had in my head, it's like, I'm at $2,400. I'm expecting to go down to 22. If somebody offered me 22, I'll let the car go, So I was like, yeah, let me think about it. I looked it up. It's like, yeah, the heads are going for this much. I'm like, screw it. I'll do that. I'll take those heads. I always wanted stage 6 heads. Not that these were stage 6 heads, but it's like, this is a close, aluminum heads and everything. So I told him I'd do the trade. So he came out, and I think I told you this before. It's funny because how you see him on TV, that's how he is. He really is like that. I mean, he showed up in shorts and flip flops. I think he was wearing socks with the flip flops, if I remember right. And cool guy, just shooting the shit. And he says, "Yeah, I think I think I'm going to build it like a NASCAR, because there's so many parts missing on the car. And if you're building a NASCAR race car. You wouldn't need all those parts. It'd just be empty, so just drop a drivetrain in it and make it into a NASCAR clone. So I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. Sounds cool, So he said, all right, I'm going to send my buddy out. And I think it was the following weekend. His buddy came out with a trailer and brought the heads and loaded up the car, and away it went. And then I think it sat, because that was 2009, and I'm not sure when the Roadkill episode started, but I think it was quite a few years later, maybe
Oh
four,
yeah,
four or
that car
five.
had to have been. Yeah, that car had to have been sitting for years
Yeah, at
before it
his
actually
place.
got on TV. Yeah.
Yeah. So that bottle of piss that was in the car, that was not at my place. Just so we're clear about that.
I didn't even
That
have that on
happened.
my list of questions. I should have put it on the list of
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
God, that's
Not me.
funny. So you sell the car to Freiberger.
Yeah.
You have no idea that this car is going to eventually become the flagship of Roadkill. You have no idea.
No idea.
When is the next time you see the car, and what's your, like, do you understand that that's the Charger I sold? Like, what was that like?
So Anthony Spriggs, a guy on Facebook, I I I don't know, somehow we friended somehow. I can't even remember. I think it was on some other website, some other car type website, because I wasn't even into Facebook back then.
Okay.
And he would just, shoot the shit with me here and there, kind of touch base with me. And then I think he was the one that told me, he goes, "Hey, dude, I think one of your cars is on this TV show Roadkill, And I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." And so that's when I went out to go look for the Roadkill show, which I believe, they didn't have their network stuff at the time. It was just on YouTube. So if
Yeah.
I remember right. So
Yeah,
yeah, I
you're
think I
right.
searched it out on YouTube, and I was like, "Oh yeah." So that was the first time I saw it. It's kind of a trip. It's like, yeah, it looks exactly like it did when I left my yard, except it runs.
God, that's a trip. Johnny's had so many Mopars that one of them became famous, okay?
Yeah,
That's like having 10 kids and one of them becoming an actor or something,
yeah.
okay?
Nobody
The
cares
odds.
about the rest of them.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So, you see your old car, it's, on the internet at that time on YouTube, and then eventually it blows up on TV. The car ends up becoming, famous. Like,
Yeah,
in the automotive world, the car is famous. I think
definitely.
anybody in the world of Mopar, if you say, "Hey, do you know Roadkill?" They'd probably say yes. "Do you know General Mayhem?" They'd probably say yes. I mean,
Yes.
I know when I saw the car, I thought, I'd drive that daily. I'm looking around like, I don't
Yeah,
think anybody that I know would drive that car daily, but I
yeah,
sure as hell would,
yeah.
because I'm crazy like that. But what do you think of the evolution of the car?
Man, I'm a bit torn on it. I mean, to be
Yeah.
honest, when I saw the show come out, like, and you gotta kind of think, like, now we think of the show, I think most people would never want to change anything about the car, really, But
Yeah.
when it first came out, I was like, man, I had some shitty grills laying around. Like, I wish I had thrown enough pieces, like broken grills, in the car so they could have, like, zip tied something together. Because I hated that mesh they put on it with the two headlights on there. I hated it, but you know, shit, I forgot what your your question was.
It was the evolution of the car
Oh, okay.
from when you
Sorry.
sold it,
Yes.
and yeah, and where it's at now.
So I loved everything with the motorhome 440.
Mhm.
I wish they did a little more, because I had my Roadrunner story is very similar to how this car was kind of built. I ended up picking up a factory warranty engine, long block RV engine 440, and I put that in my Roadrunner. But I put a cam in it and headers, and did some stuff to it to give it a little more pep. And with that backdrop, I wish they had done a little more with the 440, rather than just sort of plucking it from the motorhome and dropping it in. It's like, man,
Sure.
if you guys just threw a little cam in there, throw some headers on there, give it just a little bit more bitching,
Yeah.
I think it would have been awesome. But once they got the car running and they're tearing through all the dirt fields and stuff, it's like, yeah, that's badass. I loved it. I loved that car. I love that point of evolution on the car. When they went to the Hellcat, or is it a Hellcat motor? When they went
Yes.
to the bigger motor,
Yep.
I think it changed it. I think today I think it's cool, and I think it would probably be a disservice to take the car back from that and take it to a previous step in its evolution. But I would have rather what they ended up doing with that 440, and they put it in crop duster. I think if they had just done that and put that motor back into General Mayhem, to me that would have been perfect. And they should have saved the Hellcat thing for something else.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
just my
I'm
thought.
kind of with you. The only saving grace with that is that we got to see the build off between Roadkill and Gas Monkey, because I was a big fan of Aaron Kaufman,
Mhm.
and when they got a Dart, I was like, "Oh yeah, here we go. Finally some
Yeah,
love
yeah,
for the Dart," because you get all these automotive shows, and very seldomly do you see them build a Dart. So
yeah,
for Dart guys like myself, we're like, "Yes, finally one for us."
yeah,
And
yeah.
that was a fun little build off to watch. But yeah, that General Mayhem. That's when I found out you were the owner or the old owner of General Mayhem. I was like, God, that's crazy. I couldn't
Yeah,
imagine like if I sold my Dart and somebody got a hold of it and something
yeah,
crazy like that happened. I'd be like, it's just nuts. Looking at like that used to be in. I used to work on that car.
yeah.
Have you seen it in person? Have you actually like seen the car in person since it's been built?
No, no, I
Really?
haven't. No, actually, well, and even my buddy has. My buddy took a bunch of pictures. It was at the LA car show. I don't know, a few years ago, and that car was there, and he's like, "Oh, look at your car." Took pictures of it and stuff. I didn't know about it, so it was like, whatever. When we went to the zip tie drags in Tucson, I believe that was 2018, January 2018, if I remember right, 17 or 18. Um, I was really hoping the car would be there. It's kind of a long haul from Southern California to there,
Yeah.
and but my buddy Chris Field and I went, and we brought our families, and I was like, I want to go. I want to bring. I still have the cylinder heads, and they're still in the box. I've never put them on an engine, uh, and I wanted them to sign the heads, or at least the box. I ended up bringing just one box, and I left the head in it. Just I don't know, just for to be like, yeah, the cylinder head's still there,
Yeah.
and I actually found Finnegan first, and kind of told him, was like, hey, I sold you guys General Mayhem. I traded it for these cylinder heads, and I was wondering if you could sign the box. And he's like, oh yeah, sure. Finnegan was really cool dude. So he signed it, and then I was like, do you know where Freiberger's at? And he's like, I don't know. He's filming something somewhere. And I'm like, okay. And then he's like, there he is, and he was kind of being ushered by this lady was with him, like they were going to go do some filming or something. And
Mm.
I was like, hey Dave, can I get you to sign this box? And I told him too. I was like, you probably don't remember me, but I traded you General Mayhem for these cylinder heads. And he's like, oh yeah, cool, man. And he signed it really fast. And then she basically rushed him away. And he's like, well, come by for the, cause him and Freiberg, or him and Finnegan would sit and like sign stuff, sign t-shirts or whatever. He's like, well, come by and then, we'll talk some more. I was like, all right, cool. And then, so the next day it was like, God, the line was just a mile long, around the building. And I'm like, screw that. I'm not waiting in that long line. So, but I got the box signed.
Very cool. Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they hear this show.
All right.
I
That'd
want
be
you to be
awesome.
I want you to be reunited with that car. They owe you a
Well,
drive in that thing or something, because if it wasn't for that car, they probably wouldn't be as
oh,
I
that'd
mean,
be
General
cool.
Mayhem, they can say whatever they want. Great show. Love Roadkill. Love those guys. I think they really did change, or at least have a giant impact on the car enthusiast market. I know you and I talked about that. The blue collar everyday guy can go out there and it doesn't
Do
have to look
this.
good. It just has to
Yeah.
do what it does. And I commend them for that. But I definitely
Well, and
I
I think
definitely go
if
ahead.
you look at all the episodes, it's like that one episode with that one car, I think basically epitomizes everything about the show. I mean, it was just,
Absolutely.
you hit the nail on the head. I mean, if you used whatever, let's just say a generic car, let's say a Chevelle that's, let's say a Malibu, not quite as cool, a non-S, I don't know, whatever it is, it's like doing a Charger, especially now, it's like they are so out of reach as far as being attainable or affordable and stuff. But taking a car that even then, even though it was sort of cheaper, they didn't pay anything for the car they got from me really. But, by the time they were doing the show, it's like you're taking one of the most iconic muscle cars on the face of the planet that deserves to be completely restored. Like most people would be like, this is a Charger, you can't do that. You have to restore this thing, it's got to be all perfect. So they took that car and they did this slam, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and just thrashed on the car going down dirt roads and trails and stuff like it was nothing, like they didn't care, like how it really was,
Yeah,
back in the 90s,
absolutely. I
So
know that. Yeah, they. I agree 100%. I don't think they would have had as much of an impact if it wasn't for the Charger. If it was a
yeah,
Camaro or, like you said, a Chevelle or a Malibu, I mean, come on.
yeah,
It had to have been a Charger. It was
I think
destiny
so.
that you would get some cylinder heads for that Charger, and that Charger would become famous. And as a matter of fact, I hope that shirt you're wearing, I hope that shirt was free. If not, hey, Freiburger, you need to send Jonny Mopar some free swag, okay?
He
Because
does.
if it was,
I paid for this. I bought it in Tucson. I paid for it. Oh,
give him a gift
and,
card or something. Come on.
right? And it's wrong. I don't know if you know this or not, but this is an inverted picture of the car. So you see that fender? That
Supposed
is
to be on the other side.
it is. That is a 69 fender.
That is funny.
So it looks like it's, I don't know if this video inverts or not because I've seen that, but
Sure.
this is actually, the picture is on the driver's side, but the driver's side is a
That is
68.
funny.
That's what I put on the car, a red 68. They put a 69 on the other side. So yeah,
Funny. Funny. Well, there you go, folks. Something you don't know. And
right.
hopefully we can get this video online, but so you guys can actually see what Johnny's
Oh
talking
yeah.
about. But
Now you have to make a video of it. They
I
have to
have
see
to.
that.
I was trying to do the research because I got to be honest, I haven't looked into. I know that the audio records, but I'm not sure how to get the video.
Okay.
I think it automatically records, but I'm not sure. So hopefully we don't lose the video. Hopefully we got this video.
Cool.
But all right, so that's General Mayhem. That's I've been wanting to get that story out there for a while because I know you've told it before online, but there's
Yeah.
something about getting a story out where you actually can hear someone tell it. It's
Yeah.
always better than just reading a Facebook post. So I'm
Oh,
hoping that
definitely.
people know the origins of General Mayhem, and that car didn't just magically appear at Freiburger's place. Okay,
No. No.
it was Jonny Mopar's first, and before that, it was in a pod on some guy's property.
Yep.
That, I mean, you have to go back. I'm going to listen to this podcast again and just think about that because that just seems like something a Mopar guy would do.
Yes. Yes.
Code
Definitely.
enforcement, we better bury these things.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh, we've talked about that all the time. We John, I've told John, it's like, yeah, what you really need is because he's talked about burying cars, like burying them
Oh,
underground, so
God.
code enforcement wouldn't know. It's like, well, you need a hill. If you had a hill, then you could carve out a cave and put all your cars in there, and then put brush over it or whatever. You know.
That's I never really thought about that. Maybe I'll contact the cities and get a hold of some of those guys because I'm sure they see some cars. I never really thought
Oh yeah.
about that. That might be a good way to find cars. Like, hey,
You
so
know,
you do code enforcement, huh?
I have a story.
Hey, we got time. What? Tell
Oh,
us the story, Johnny.
all right. Well, it's not my story. It's a buddy of mine's
Okay.
story. But somewhere out here, this guy had like 100 cars or something like that, and code enforcement nailed him and was going to abate all his, or he had abated. They call it abated vehicles. That's the crime. It's abated vehicles. Basically, a bunch of 9 running cars in your property. I think he had 100, and so my buddy Eric, he lived next door to this guy that was a tow truck driver, I think for AAA, and or maybe contracts with AAA. I don't know how that works, but anyways, he tells him, is like, hey, dude, this guy's got 100 cars. we're all going in there, like a bunch of tow trucks, and they're towing all of these cars out, and they're all going to the crusher. They're all going to the junkyard. And he says one of them is a 69 Polara police car, a real police car, like black and white, was a California Highway Patrol car.
Cool.
And he says it's got a big block in it, or well, he didn't know, but my buddy was like, it's probably a big block. He's like, yeah, I want the motor out of that thing. A tree had fallen on the car, so the roof was crushed on it, I guess. So he's like, well, how much? And he's like, I think he paid $200 or $300 for the car. So the neighbor tow truck driver goes to the property. There's a bunch of these tow trucks going in there, all grabbing cars, and they're leaving. Instead of taking the Polara to the boneyard or the crusher or whatever, he takes it to my buddy's house, gets the $200, and then goes back to hauling other cars out of there. I don't know what else was in the yard. I think that was the only Mopar. But my buddy pulls the 440 out of the car, and then he's got this 69 Polara black and white cop car with the roof crushed on it. And he's in a housing tract, living at his grandma and grandpa's place, and no room, no backyard, no side access. It's like, he's got to get rid of this thing. So what does he do? He pushes it down the street and around the corner and just abandons the car.
Oh my God.
And then until, a cop rolls by or something, sees abandoned car, and then they tow the car off, and of course it gets crushed. So later on, he ended up putting that 440 in his 69 Roadrunner. But, he'll tell you now, he's like, yeah, what was I thinking? Why didn't I keep that car? How cool is that? A real California Highway Patrol car, So
Very cool. Yeah, that's gosh, sometimes I wonder, like, I've been to an auction that was pretty cool. It was a guy locally named Ben Snowbar, and he's a local legend as far as Mopars go. And the auction was crazy. I've never seen a Mopar collection as big as his, and I don't know if
wow.
I'll ever see one that big again. I have all sorts of pictures from that thing, but I couldn't help but wonder while I was at that auction. I was like, I wonder how many collections like this exist that nobody knows about publicly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ben was, he sold parts, and he was, everybody in the local Mopar scene, to me in the Northwest, knew who he was. I'm wondering how many of those guys exist that, stay reclusive, that just go to
Yeah.
these, swap meets and whatnot and buy these parts and just don't tell anybody, and what's going
Yeah.
to happen to these collections. So I don't know. I've been saying for a while that I just need to save up, a lot of money so that
Yeah.
when those auctions come up, because I've seen a couple where I wish I could have attended just to get one thing. I got one thing from that auction. I told myself, I was like, all right, I got a little bit of money, but I don't have enough to buy a car, but I'm going to pick something in this because if you look at the pictures that I have them on the Mopar Hunter page. He had so much stuff, like 10 lifetimes worth of probably what I'll ever have.
Yeah.
But he had a couple air cleaner lids, the Coyote Duster air cleaner lids, apparently off of Hemi cars. And
Wow.
he had two of them. One was burnt up, and the other one was, a little patinaed and a little ratty. And I was like, I want that one. It was lot number 1, I think. It was one of the first lots that actually got auctioned off. And I was like, all right, this is probably the only time I'm ever going to attend a Mopar auction like this. I'm leaving here with a souvenir, and I want that. So I told myself, I've got a lot of money, and I'm willing to burn it just to have that. And I got into a bidding war with some guy who had a lot more money than me. And he actually, I mentioned something about that online. He was like, oh, I was the guy who was bidding against you, and I bought the other one because I was getting greedy. I was like, I'm buying this one and the next one. I didn't buy the other one. I spent a little too much buying the first one. But man, I understand why the cars at like Barrett Jackson and Mecum, why they go for so much sometimes, because even with little things, when you're only spending a few $100, they get into that bidding, and you're winning the bid. And then all of a sudden some guy raises his hand. You're like, oh, you're trying to take something out from under, and then it becomes a bidding war. And it's like it's a high that I can't explain. I'm like, God, it's a good thing I'm not rich, because I probably would have just said, how much for everything?
Right.
But yeah, those I wonder how many collections like that exist, and how many more auctions we're going to see in the future.
Well, and a lot of that stuff doesn't go to auctions, you know.
True.
There was, well, that GTS that I bought from Mike Coffey a few years ago. I think he said that the guy had passed away, and so the wife was getting rid of all this stuff, and I don't know, it was a buddies of Mike's that had found this lady, and he was buying some other kind of car, like an Oldsmobile or
Mm.
whatever, something else. And it's like, hey, he knows Mike's into Mopars, so hey, he's got a couple of Mopars over here. And so, and the brother was there, and he had some Mopars. You'll have to get the story from Mike, but basically, this guy passed on, and he had a handful of cars. And it wasn't a huge collection, but I think it was 5 or 6 cars or something like that. And one of them was this freaking GTS that just, I think it's been sitting there from the 80s. The 340 got plucked out of it. The trans was gone, but the car just sat there and cooked. Paint was all
Wow.
pretty much cooked on it, but it had nice patina to it. And then I have some Danish friends that they bought a Firebird from somebody. And so, long story short, because they're in Denmark, this guy brought the Firebird to my house to park it here, and then it's going to go over to Denmark, right? When the guy comes to bring the car, he's like, "Oh yeah, this guy passed away. He had a whole collection of cars," and he starts showing me on his cell phone. He's like, "Yeah, check out, these cars. One of them's a '70 Charger RT. I think it was a 444 speed, plum crazy purple, like restored, but it was just cake dust. Like the car had been sitting for 5 or 10 years. And this Firebird was the same way. And he had, he wasn't like into any particular brand. He had a bunch of cars, but yeah, passed away. The wife's like, just get rid of them. It
Wow.
never went to auction. This guy somehow got hooked up with her and was like, "I'll help you sell these cars." And so they started selling these cars off. And yeah, I'm not even sure where they posted them, but my Danish friends bought the Firebird. So
Crazy.
I think there's a lot of them out there. I think there's a lot of guys out there like
There,
that.
there definitely is. There you have it, my friends. Another fun episode of Talking Mopars is in the books. Thanks for joining me on this installment of Direct Connections. I hope you enjoyed the show today. I know I sure did. I love these Direct Connections episodes. Jonny was an amazing guest, and Chuck and Matt were amazing guests. So far, I've had 3 amazing guests. And you know what? I'm looking forward to talking Mopars with so many other people that I wish I could just quit my day job and do this podcast full time. There's just so many Mopar enthusiasts out there with great stories and so much to talk about that, frankly, I'm having anxiety just thinking about how I'm going to get them all scheduled. But we will make it happen, so stay tuned. For more information about this podcast or to listen and subscribe to the show, please visit talkingmopars.com. And don't forget that you can send me your stories, questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, and everything else on your mind to chris@talkingmopars.com. And hey, if you have an idea of somebody that would make a great guest on the show, or if you would make a great guest on the show, reach out to me, let me know what you think. And hey, if you are more of a talker than a typer, you can also leave me a voice message on my voice mailbox. The number is 209-28-MOPAR, and I will play those messages on the show. So if you have a story to share and you don't mind being heard on the show, send it in to the voicemail. And if you could do me one favor, folks, please help me spread the word about this show. Share it on your social media and tell all of your Mopar-addicted friends about this podcast, and that will help us grow, get more guests, and maybe someday I'll be able to do this show more than just once a week. But until then, that does it for this week. Until we talk again, I am your host, Chris Albrecht, and that was Talking Mopars Direct Connections.
Thank you for listening to Talking Mopars, your direct connection to all things Mopar. Until next time, remember, no Mopar left behind.